Good to be here. Good to see some familiar faces. First of all, I just want to start by saying, anytime you're asked to return to a place that you helped build, you had.
Did the Indiana Fever just pull off the most ruthless, calculated power play in the history of professional basketball? Or are they walking completely blind into a massive, catastrophic disaster that they cannot possibly control? When a once-in-a-generation talent steps onto the hardwood, the entire world watches every single move. And for the Indiana Fever, that glaring spotlight quickly turned into a high-powered magnifying glass that exposed every single flaw, fracture, and failure within their organization. The end of this recent season wasn't just a disappointing conclusion to a promising year. It was a total, unmitigated collapse that left die-hard fans absolutely speechless and sent the front office scrambling into a state of absolute panic. Caitlin was visibly battered, bruised, and emotionally drained after a grueling rookie campaign where she faced an unprecedented level of physical targeting, relentless defensive pressure, and a shocking lack of protection from her own team. The playoff series against the Connecticut Sun was supposed to be a triumphant showcase of the Fever's incredibly bright future, but instead, it mutated into a brutal, humiliating reality check on national television. The team looked entirely unprepared, totally disconnected, and completely overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of the moment, ultimately getting swept right out of the postseason without putting up a viable fight. You could physically see the sheer exhaustion in the players' eyes and the utter, baffling lack of adjustment from the sidelines, which made it painfully obvious that something fundamental had to change immediately. The coaching staff appeared completely paralyzed, unable to protect their golden franchise star or scheme their way out of a dominant, suffocating defensive trap set by their opponents. It wasn't just a playoff loss, it was a total breakdown of organizational trust on the biggest possible stage. And the devastating fallout from that humiliating exit was only just beginning to take shape. Behind closed doors, the intense humiliation of that playoff exit triggered an immediate, aggressive, and entirely cutthroat chain reaction within the highest levels of the franchise's hierarchy. Enter Kelly Krauskopf, the legendary architect behind the Fever's historic 2012 championship run, who was suddenly and shockingly brought back as the president of basketball operations to clean up this monumental, embarrassing mess. She didn't return to her old stomping grounds to play nice, make friends, or hand out unearned second chances. She was brought in by ownership to execute a complete, total, and ruthless overhaul of a failing, outdated system. The writing was on the wall for head coach Christy Sides almost instantly, as the front office rapidly realized they could not afford to waste a single second of their superstars' prime developmental years with a leader who couldn't command the absolute respect of the locker room. Krauskopf took one long, hard look at the chaotic practice environment, the baffling lack of late-game execution, and the deeply fractured relationships between the core players, and knew a drastic, immediate culture shift was the only viable option left on the table. Firing Sides wasn't just about punishing someone for the playoff collapse. It was a highly calculated, aggressive message broadcast to the entire organization that mediocrity, confusion, and passive leadership would no longer be tolerated under any circumstances whatsoever. The new president recognized instantly that the team lacked a cohesive identity, a physical backbone, and a modern strategy to maximize the most valuable and heavily scrutinized asset in the entire sports world today. Rumors immediately started flying at breakneck speed about who could possibly step into this absolute pressure cooker of a job and actually survive the intense, daily media scrutiny without cracking. The front office desperately needed someone with a proven championship pedigree, someone who commanded instant, unquestionable respect from veteran players, and most importantly, someone who wasn't terrified of the massive, glowing target painted squarely on their back. But the specific person they secretly set their sights on was already deeply tied up in a wildly controversial situation of her own, completely on the other side of the league. While the Fever were busy aggressively cleaning house and severing ties with their coaching staff, a wildly suspicious and heavily scrutinized situation was unfolding over in Connecticut with their esteemed head coach, Stephanie White. White had just masterfully orchestrated the exact defensive game plan that completely dismantled and embarrassed Indiana in the playoffs, humiliating them in front of millions of viewers on national television. Yet, within mere weeks of that triumphant, dominant series, loud whispers began circulating through league circles that she was abruptly parting ways with the Sun, despite having a loaded, veteran roster perfectly built to contend for a championship right now. The timing of this departure was highly suspect, to put it mildly, leading to massive, widespread speculation that intense, secret back-channel negotiations had been happening entirely under the radar for quite some time. Some highly connected insiders suggested that White was deeply frustrated with the Suns' organizational limitations and lack of practice facilities, while others pointed to an undeniable, magnetic pull to return to Indiana, where she had previously played and coached to great success. The very idea that a highly successful coach would willingly walk away from a championship-contending organization just days after a deep playoff run raised major red flags across the entire basketball landscape, with serious accusations surfacing about potential tampering and secret deals happening entirely in the shadows. Fans, analysts, and rival executives couldn't help but connect the obvious dots, realizing that Krauskopf and White shared a deep, unbreakable pre-existing relationship forged during their glory days, building the Fever into a powerhouse. The public narrative rapidly shifted from a simple, standard coaching vacancy to a potentially orchestrated, mastermind takeover plan that had been quietly in the works long before the Fever's turbulent season even officially came to an end. If these intense rumors hold any actual weight, it means the Fever's ruthless front office was actively plotting this aggressive regime change while their previous coach was still helplessly drawing up plays on the sideline. But luring a high-profile, highly coveted coach away from a bitter rival team was only half of the massive battle. The real, terrifying nightmare was waiting for her quietly inside the walls of her own locker room. What the general public and the millions of new fans didn't fully see during the Fever's heavily televised season was a locker room environment that was dangerously, constantly close to boiling completely over into total dysfunction. Throughout the entire year, there were constant, inescapable whispers of deep-seated friction, simmering veteran jealousy, and a glaring, undeniable lack of chemistry that the previous coaching staff simply lacked the authority or respect to actually fix. Players were visibly frustrated with their highly inconsistent roles. Critical defensive assignments were routinely blown due to a complete lack of on-court communication, and the defeated body language on the bench often told a depressing story of a team deeply divided into separate cliques. NaLyssa Smith, a former high lottery pick with immense talent, began posting incredibly cryptic, passive-aggressive messages online, liking social media posts that heavily hinted at her extreme dissatisfaction with her usage and the overall confusing direction of the franchise. The previous coaching staff had utterly and completely lost the respect of the locker room long before the playoffs even began, leading to a highly toxic atmosphere where mutual trust was practically non-existent, and every single minor mistake was heavily magnified by the intense, unforgiving media glare. Established veterans privately felt sidelined and disrespected by the massive, unprecedented attention constantly placed on the incoming rookie class, creating an incredibly awkward, tense dynamic where the team's best, youngest player was unfairly tasked with navigating complex, bruised egos without any real help from the adults in the room. There were even heavily circulated, unverified rumors that at one highly volatile point during a brutal early-season losing streak, key players held a closed door, players-only meeting that intentionally excluded the coaching staff just so they could freely air out their deep grievances without fear of immediate retaliation. This deeply fractured, highly fragile dynamic is exactly why the newly installed front office panicked and pulled the plug on the previous regime with such breathtaking speed, knowing that if this toxic energy festered for another off-season, it would completely ruin their rapidly closing championship window. The new head coach wouldn't just be drawing up offensive sets and managing timeouts. They would be stepping in as a full-time crisis manager for a highly emotional team perpetually on the absolute verge of internal collapse. And that brings us directly to the truly shocking, non-negotiable mandate that the front office has explicitly laid out for their incoming, highly paid leadership. Kelly Krauskopf isn't just handing over the expensive keys to the franchise and wishing her new coach good luck. She is delivering a strict, aggressive, and completely non-negotiable message about exactly what is expected from day one. The heavy demand placed squarely on Stephanie White's shoulders is reportedly blunt, terrifying, and absolute. Fix the playoff collapse, physically protect the franchise star at all costs, and establish total, undeniable dominance in the league, or this entire, highly publicized experiment will blow up in everyone's faces in historic fashion. This is absolutely not a rebuilding year. There is no patience for a slow transition, and there is zero grace period for a new, complicated system to slowly take root. The firm expectation from ownership down is a deep, highly competitive playoff run right out of the gate. Krauskopf knows firsthand that the modern league is significantly more physical, faster, and cutthroat than ever before, and she expects the new coaching staff to aggressively implement an old-school enforcer mentality that violently stops opposing teams from bullying, hitting, or intimidating their star players. The message sent from the president's office is crystal clear that the passive, confusing, overly polite rotations of the past are entirely dead, and absolutely anyone on the roster who isn't entirely bought into the new, hyper-aggressive culture will be aggressively and permanently shipped out of town. White is being explicitly tasked with an almost impossible, highly delicate balancing act, massaging the heavily bruised egos of unhappy, disgruntled veterans while simultaneously ensuring that the entire offensive system flows perfectly and seamlessly through their generational, record-breaking point guard. The front office has made it abundantly clear that they will open the checkbook and provide whatever resources, staff, or facilities are necessary to win. But in direct return, they demand absolute, uncompromising accountability and a locker room that is entirely, unbrokenly unified against the rest of the league. If the team starts the next highly anticipated season looking sluggish, disorganized, or physically intimidated by their rivals in any way, the blame will instantly, heavily fall on the coaching staff for failing to execute the president's grand, ruthless vision. But the immense, suffocating pressure stemming from the front office is genuinely only a tiny fraction of the total stress, because the actual roster itself is a literal ticking time bomb, just waiting to completely detonate at the worst possible moment. As if the intense coaching drama and front office takeovers weren't completely overwhelming enough, the Fever are staring directly down the barrel of a wildly unpredictable, highly dangerous off-season that could completely alter the trajectory of their franchise for the next decade. Kelsey Mitchell, the team's absolute most reliable veteran scorer, the heart of their transition offense, and a wildly crucial piece of their entire engine, is officially entering unrestricted free agency, and losing her to a rival team would be an absolutely catastrophic, potentially unrecoverable blow. Mitchell has endured years of losing seasons, endless organizational drama, and the tragic, heartbreaking loss of her father during the season, meaning she owes absolutely nothing to the franchise if she decides she desperately wants a completely fresh start in a quieter market. If Mitchell decides that the relentless, exhausting drama surrounding basketball in Indiana simply isn't worth the daily headache and signs a massive contract elsewhere, the entire offensive burden heavily falls squarely back onto the shoulders of a second-year player, completely and utterly unraveling the team's entire blueprint for success. Furthermore, the front office desperately has to figure out exactly what to do with heavily disgruntled players who clearly want out of the intense spotlight, meaning they must masterfully navigate high-stakes, incredibly complex trades without losing vital leverage to rival general managers who know they are desperate. Adding massive fuel to this already raging fire, the new collective bargaining agreement is looming dangerously over the entire league like a dark cloud, meaning player salaries are about to absolutely skyrocket, and the tiny, fleeting window to build a legitimate super team on a heavily restricted budget is rapidly slamming shut. The Fever currently find themselves at the absolute white-hot center of a massive, unprecedented financial revolution in women's professional sports, generating record-breaking, jaw-dropping revenue numbers, which means ownership is forcefully demanding a pristine product on the floor that perfectly matches the incredible hype. They simply cannot afford to look like a disorganized, fumbling lottery team while playing in front of absolutely sold-out, screaming arenas and breaking national television viewership records every single night they step onto the court. Every single roster move, every draft pick, every tense contract negotiation, and every trade rumor this offseason carries the incredibly heavy weight of the franchise's long-term financial survival, and just one wrong, miscalculated move could instantly send them spiraling right back to the dark bottom of the league standings. But the absolute fiercest, most unforgiving battle they will face won't be negotiated in a quiet boardroom or fought on the practice court. It will be fought daily in the ruthless, unpredictable court of public opinion. The sheer, overwhelming volume of intense media attention, viral social media scrutiny, and rabid fan obsession surrounding this specific franchise has reached a terrifying level that the sport of basketball has genuinely never seen before in its entire history. Millions upon millions of brand new, highly vocal fans have recently flooded completely into the basketball ecosystem, bringing with them intense, unwavering opinions, endless, heated debates, and an incredibly, dangerously short fuse for any form of failure or perceived disrespect toward their favorite players. When the Fever were brutally losing games early in the previous season, the massive backlash wasn't just politely confined to the back pages of local newspapers. It was a highly aggressive, daily, globally trending topic across every single major social media platform, creating a relentless, exhausting digital circus that players could not escape. This intense, deafening external noise inevitably penetrates the heavily guarded walls of the locker room, deeply affecting the mental health, focus, and confidence of the players, ultimately forcing the front office to make rapid, sometimes incredibly cutthroat, reactive decisions just to temporarily quiet the massive public outrage. The new wave of fans are ruthlessly, violently protective of their new superstar point guard, and any slight perception that she is being unfairly held back by incompetent, outdated coaching, or maliciously ignored by jealous, selfish teammates immediately sparks a massive, uncontrollable digital uproar that consumes the news cycle for days. This highly volatile, completely unforgiving environment is the exact, precise situation. Stephanie White is voluntarily, perhaps crazily, walking directly into a terrifying reality where a simple, standard two-game losing streak will instantly trigger national television segments, angrily debating her immediate job security and calling for her head. Krauskopf heavily knows that the franchise's brand image is currently walking an incredibly thin, incredibly dangerous tightrope. perfectly balanced between being celebrated as a historic, transformative success story and being widely mocked as a tragic, embarrassing, cautionary tale of totally squandered generational potential. They are fighting tooth and nail every single day to prove to the entire sports world that they are a serious, legitimate, championship-caliber organization and absolutely not just a highly profitable, traveling novelty circus merely capitalizing on one single player's immense, unprecedented global popularity. And as the final, highly contested pieces on this massive, high-stakes chessboard finally begin to settle into their places, the ultimate stakes for this upcoming, highly anticipated season have become terrifyingly, undeniably clear to absolutely everyone involved. The final, unyielding message has been definitively sent from the highest level